Welcome to Amplifying Impact, the podcast for leaders who strive to create exceptional experiences, develop high-performing teams, and lead with purpose. I'm Mark Watkins, the founder of Amplifying Impact Events. I bring decades of leadership experience rooted in the hospitality industry. However, because the pursuit of growth, excellence, and meaningful impact is a universal goal, the principles I share apply to leaders across all industries and sectors. Each episode delivers actionable insights and practical tools to help you amplify your impact on your team, customers, and community. You'll get valuable content, enough to make a real difference in your leadership journey. However, the complete transformation awaits you at our live events. Let's get started and amplify your impact together. You think you lead with integrity, you believe your team trusts you, you're confident that your words and your actions align. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You might be wrong. And the gap between how you think you lead and how your team experiences your leadership, that gap is costing you influence every single day. Welcome back to Amplifying Impact, the podcast where we equip leaders and build teams through field-tested systems that actually work. In episode 2, I introduced the Impact Leadership Assessment, a framework we use to evaluate leadership effectiveness across 6 core elements. Impact is an acronym. I, which is influence with integrity. M, multiply what matters. P, pursue clarity and excellence. A is act with intentionality, C is cultivate growth, and T is transformation through service. I'm Mark Watkins, your host, and today kicks off a 6-part series where I share one practical tool for strengthening each of these elements. Now, we have multiple tools that we use to equip leaders in each area, and we customize the solution based on what the individual leader needs. But in this series, I'm going to introduce to you one powerful tool for each element so you can see how systematic leadership development works. If you were to take the Impact Leadership Assessment and scored lowest on the Influence with Integrity, this episode is specifically for you. But honestly, every leader needs to hear this because blind spots don't discriminate. Today, we're tackling what might be the most uncomfortable and most valuable leadership tool you'll ever encounter. It's called the 360 Leadership Assessment. This is the mirror you're afraid to look into, but it's also a tool that can transform your leadership if you're brave enough to see what everyone else already sees. Before we dive in, if you're finding value in the systematic approaches to leadership development, make sure you subscribe or follow Amplifying Impact Podcast so you don't miss a future episode. We're releasing new tools and frameworks designed to transform how you develop leaders, and you'll want to catch every one. Let me tell you about a leader whose 360 assessment I facilitated. We'll call him Brian. Brian was a senior leader at a high-volume Chick-fil-A location, 2 years in the role, consistently hit his numbers, strong data-driven mindset, hyper-focused on productivity, customer experience metrics, and profitability. By all external measures, he was successful. His financials looked good, his customer feedback scores were improving, his operator could see the metrics trending in the right direction, but his team, they were quietly struggling, and Brian had absolutely no idea. Here's the reality. Most leaders have zero idea how they're perceived by their teams. And I'm not talking about whether people like them. I'm talking about whether people trust them, whether their words carry weight, whether their influence comes from their character or just their title. Remember, the impact assessment element that we're addressing is the I, influence with integrity. Now, to be fair, we all have blind spots, but these are the gaps between what we intend and what others experience. What we say matters and what our actions prove matters, and what we think we are and who we actually show up as. And here's why blind spots are so dangerous for leaders. You cannot fix what you cannot see. So let's get back to Brian's story. Here's what Brian's leadership team knew that Brian didn't. His team was reporting a completely different version of him than the one his operator was seeing. When leadership was in the store, Brian was professional, thoughtful, collaborative, but the moment they left, his team experienced someone else entirely, aggressive, harsh, reactive. Multiple junior leaders reported that Brian's tone during stressful moments was damaging morale and pushing people away. When his operator sat down with him for his performance review, Brian scored 2 out of 5 in team respect and effective communication. He was shocked. He genuinely believed his team respected him. He thought that he was a good communicator. He prided himself on his integrity. And here's the thing, his intentions were good. He believed his intentions were good, but the gap between his intentions and his impact, it was destroying his leadership. Brian's blind spots were costing him everything. Here are the gaps that were impacting Brian's influence with his team. The integrity gap. He behaved one way when leadership was present and completely different when leadership was absent. The team saw the inconsistency and lost trust. There's a communication gap. Under stress, his tone became harsh and aggressive. He'd send poorly worded messages without pausing to think. He'd react instead of respond, and the team experienced this as uncaring and sarcastic. Then there's the priority gap. Brian said he valued people, but his actions proved he valued metrics more. He'd push for productivity at the expense of relationships. And the team felt it. They weren't people to Brian. They were numbers. Brian had lost the people over profits approach. When feedback came to him, and it came regularly from his operator, Brian would rationalize his behavior. He'd make small adjustments, but within days, he'd slip back into old patterns. Why? Because he couldn't see the problem clearly enough to fix it permanently. But here's the cost of those blind spots. When leaders operate with blind spots around their integrity and influence, here's what it costs. 1, trust erodes. It erodes gradually and then suddenly. Small inconsistencies compound until credibility collapses. 2, your best people leave first. High performers will not tolerate leadership they don't respect. 3, you lose the ability to lead through change. Influence becomes about position, not character. And number 4, your team stops being honest with you. They tell you what you want to hear, not what you need to know. And the most dangerous part, you won't know what's happening until it's too late. For over a year, Brian's operator had been giving him feedback, direct, specific feedback, multiple coaching conversations, performance reviews that spelled out everything clearly, but Brian just couldn't hear it. Or more accurately, he couldn't believe it. He thought his boss was being too critical. He thought his team was being oversensitive. He rationalized every incident. That's when his operator knew that he needed a 360 leadership assessment, because the problem wasn't Brian didn't have the feedback. The problem was that he didn't trust the source enough to act on it. How do you expose blind spots when you can't see on your own, or you won't believe when they're pointed out by one person? That's where the 360 leadership assessment comes in. Let me give you an overview of this tool. The 360 leadership assessment, sometimes called a 360-degree feedback, is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of just having the leader evaluate themselves or getting feedback from a single source, we gather anonymous input from every angle. Supervisors who can see the leader from above, peers who can see the leader from the side, direct reports who can see the leader from below, and sometimes, if it makes sense, external stakeholders where they can see the leader from the outside. The leader also completes an assessment about themselves. And here's where it gets powerful. We compare how the leader sees themselves with how everyone else experiences them. Those are the gaps. Those are the blind spots. And once a leader can see them, we can fix them. So why this works for influence with integrity. If you were to take the assessment and you scored lowest in this area on the impact assessment, the 360 assessment is specifically designed to reveal where your actions don't match your stated values, when you're not following through on commitments, the broken promises you don't even realize you're making. This is also designed to reveal how your communication is being received, whether people experience honesty or spin. It evaluates whether your influence comes from your character or just your position. Do people respect you, or are they just complying because of your role? And finally, this assessment is designed to reveal the consistency gap, where you show up differently for different people or different situations. This isn't about judgment, it's about awareness. Here's what makes the 360 different from a performance review. A performance review is meant to evaluate behavior. The 360 is meant to be developmental. This isn't about punishment or criticism. It's about creating self-awareness that's necessary for growth. If you think of it like a mirror, you can't fix your hair if you can't see what's out of place. The 360 is the mirror that shows you what everyone else already sees. And the truth is, most leaders are terrified of this mirror. Because what if the feedback confirms their worst fears? What if their team doesn't respect them? What if they've been damaging their influence without knowing it? But here's what I've learned after facilitating many of these assessments. The leaders who lean into the discomfort are the ones who experience transformation. Brian was terrified going into his 360-degree debrief, but 6 months later, after implementing the feedback, his team engagement scores improved significantly. Why? Because he finally understood how he was being experienced, and he had the courage to change. The question isn't whether you have blind spots. You do. We all do. The question is, are you brave enough to see them? If you want to explore leadership concepts before diving into the complete framework, check out my LinkedIn newsletter where I introduce field-tested leadership principles each month. It's a great starting point for understanding the challenges these tools are designed to solve. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Mark Watkins. The newsletter is called The Leadership Hub. All right, let's get practical. How does the 360 leadership assessment work? I'm going to walk you through the complete process so you can understand exactly what's involved. Step 1 is the preparation and participant selection. First, we'll identify 8 to 12 people who will provide feedback. This needs to represent a full 360-degree view. We'll choose 1 to 2 supervisors or senior leaders who see your leader from above. We'll pick 3 or 4 peers or colleagues who work alongside the leader, and then 4 to 6 direct reports who experience the leadership directly. And maybe, and this is optional, 1 to 2 external stakeholders. This could be clients, partners, vendors who could see the leader from the outside. But really the key is diversity of perspective. You want people who see the leader in different contexts and different situations. We also have the leader complete the assessment about themselves. This self-rating becomes the comparison point that reveals the leader's blind spots. Step 2 is the assessment. It's the assessment instrument itself. Now, here's what makes a good 360 effective. It asks specific, behavioral-based questions that are tied to observable actions, not vague personality traits. For influence with integrity, we're measuring 5 key areas. The first is integrity and values alignment. We may ask questions like, does this leader's actions consistently align with their stated values? When this leader makes a commitment, can I count on them to follow through? Does this leader admit mistakes and take responsibility rather than deflecting blame? The second area is communication and transparency. We may ask questions like, does this leader communicate the why behind decisions, not just the what? When delivering difficult messages, is this leader both honest and respectful? Can I have a candid conversation with this leader without fear of negative repercussions? The third area that we measure is consistency and reliability. We may ask questions like, does this leader treat all team members fairly and consistently? Are this leader's mood and behavior predictable and stable? When this leader says something is important, do their actions prove it? And then the fourth area is influence and impact. Here we may ask questions like, does the leader's behavior inspire me to be better as a leader, be better as a team member? Does the leader's influence come from character, not just their position? When this leader asks me to do something, am I motivated to deliver excellence? So each of the questions that we ask uses a 1 to 5 rating scale from never to consistently. But here's what makes it powerful. We also include space for specific examples, and we also include open-ended questions like, what is one behavior that demonstrates this leader's integrity? What is one area where you've observed a gap between the leader's words and their actions? Or if you could give this leader one piece of advice to strengthen their influence, what would that be? No, this is just a sample of the questions we use to collect the feedback. All right, step 3 is the data collection. This is where we have a trusted facilitator, an external consultant like me comes in. Why? Anonymity is everything. If people think their feedback can be traced back to them, they won't be honest. They'll sugarcoat, they'll feel uncomfortable, and they'll avoid giving the truth that the leader needs to hear the most. So the facilitator distributes the assessments, collects the responses, and compiles the data before presenting it to the leader. And it's important to know that we randomize the data too. It's human nature to try to figure out where the feedback is coming from, who said what. Therefore, we take numerous steps to prevent this. The priority is the feedback, not knowing who gave it. The leader needs to trust the process and prepare to receive the feedback with an open mind. The next step, step 4, is where we analyze and report the data in a way that's easy to read and follow. Once the responses are collected, the facilitator creates a comprehensive report. The report will include average scores for each question. We break this down by the rating category, like supervisors, peers, etc. A comparison between the leader's self-assessment and how others rated them. This is where the blind spots become visible. The report includes key themes from the qualitative feedback, organized by pattern. We'll include the top 3 strengths, what the leader's doing well, that they should keep doing, the top 3 development areas, the specific gaps between the leader's self-assessment, their perception, and what others experience them as. And this report is not designed to shame the leader. It's designed to give them clarity about the focus that they need to take and where they need to put their development energy. Finally, step 5, this is the debrief session. This is the most important part of the entire process. The data is useless without context and a conversation. When I facilitate a 360 debrief, here's what that session looks like. Part 1 is where we process the data. We'll take 30 or 40 minutes just to walk through the results together. I present the data to the leader without judgment and give the leader space to absorb it. It's a gut punch. Sometimes it takes a few minutes just to process what you're hearing. I'm watching for defensive reactions because that's natural. Nobody likes being told their blind spots. I'll ask questions like, what surprises you? Or what confirms what you've suspected? Then part 2, we're going to explore the blind spots that were just discussed. We'll take about 20 or 30 minutes to do this. We focus on the gaps where the leader's self-rating was significantly different from the others' ratings. And we look at specific examples from the qualitative feedback. Here, I'm going to ask questions like, why do you think others experienced this differently than you intended? This is about understanding impact versus intent. A leader might have great intentions, but if the team experiences something different, the leader's intentions don't matter. Now, part 3 is where we begin identifying the root causes. We'll spend 15, 20 minutes where we just dig a little bit deeper. We move beyond surface behavior into underlying patterns. Here I might ask questions like, what drives this behavior? What are you trying to accomplish when you do this? Often leaders discover that their problematic behaviors are rooted in fear, pressure, or habits they picked up years ago that really no longer serve them. And then next is the final part, part 4. This is where we create an action plan. And we're going to spend 25, 30 minutes here. And what we're going to do here is apply our proprietary HAS framework, which is what we discussed in episode 1. So go back and listen to that to get an understanding of that framework. We don't try to fix everything at once. We focus on the top 1 or 2 development priorities, and then we build a systematic plan that identifies the habits, actions, and systems to address the gaps. That's the HAS, habits, actions, and systems. Remember from episode 1, achieving goals is less important than the habits, actions, and systems that you develop while you're pursuing those goals. And the same principle applies here. The 360 assessment, it gives you clarity about what needs to change. The HAS framework gives you the systematic approach actually to make the change sustainable. You're not just trying to be better. You're building specific habits that create the behaviors that generate the results. You're not relying on willpower or good intentions. You're creating systems that make the right choices automatic. And you're not doing this in isolation. You're building accountability that keeps you honest when it gets hard. This is how transformation happens, not through vague commitments to, quote, improve integrity, but through systematic, measurable behavioral change. And that's the beauty of the HAS framework, is that it works for any development area your 360 reveals, whether it's consistency, communication, all through, or values alignment. You build the plan the same way. All right, so hopefully you're convinced. You see the value of the 360 assessment. How do you actually implement this? Here's what I need to tell you up front. While there are DIY 360 templates available online, I strongly recommend against trying to facilitate this yourself, and here's why. Credibility and confidentiality are everything. If you administer the assessment yourself, participants won't trust that their feedback is truly anonymous. They'll hold back, they'll sugarcoat, they'll avoid the uncomfortable truths that the leader needs to hear most. And if you're the one compiling the data, you might, even unconsciously, rationalize away patterns or dismiss feedback that's hard to accept. 360 works when people believe their honesty won't have consequences. That requires a trusted third party. Why external facilitation makes all the difference? First, credibility and confidentiality. When the external facilitator administers the assessment, participants trust that their feedback is truly anonymous. They're willing to be honest because they know it can't be traced back to them. Second is the objectivity in the analysis. An external facilitator can identify patterns you might rationalize away or dismiss. I've done this enough times to know what the data is saying, and I'm not emotionally invested in protecting the leader's ego. Third, skilled debrief facilitation. Processing 360 feedback requires skill. A good facilitator knows how to present difficult truths with compassion, how to push back on defensiveness, and how to turn data into actionable development plans. This isn't just handing the leader a report and walking away. It's guiding them through one of the most vulnerable conversations they'll have as a leader. Fourth is accountability. When you commit to a development plan with a facilitator, you're more likely to follow through because someone is checking in on your progress. We don't let you off the hook when it gets hard. So what to expect if you hire a facilitator? Let me dive a little bit more into what's included. If this is a tool that you want to implement for someone on your leadership team, here's what working with a professional facilitator would look like. We do the pre-assessment consultation, a 30-minute conversation to set expectations, explain the process, help you select the right participants who represent a complete view of the leader's influence. Then we complete the assessment administration. The facilitator handles everything, the distribution, collection, guaranteed anonymity. You don't see individual responses. You don't know who said what. The assessment includes quantitative questions and open-ended feedback focused on integrity, communication, consistency, and influence. There's an analysis and a comprehensive report. The facilitator compiles the responses into a detailed report. Typically, this is 10 to 15 pages, sometimes longer. That includes average scores. It includes comparisons, key themes, qualitative feedback, the top 3 strengths, top 3 areas of development. And remember specifically that it's anonymized. The examples used can't be tied back to individual participants. Then we have the debrief session. This is where the transformation begins. This is usually going to be 90 to 120-minute session where the facilitator walks the leader through the data, helps them process the difficult feedback without defensiveness, exploring root causes, behind the patterns, and building the systematic plan using the framework that we mentioned. Then we also do a 90-day follow-up. This is structured check-ins at 30, 60, 90 days to ensure accountability and measure progress. Optionally, and we can discuss this separately, we do offer a mini reassessment at 6 or 12 months to track measurable improvements. This isn't a one-and-done exercise. It's the beginning of a systematic development journey. What does an investment in this type of assessment look like? Yes, hiring a facilitator is an investment. Comprehensive 360 assessments with professional facilitation will vary depending on the depth of the process and the follow-up selected. But here's what you need to ask yourself. What is the cost of not addressing these blind spots? How much productivity are you losing because your team doesn't trust you? And how much talent are you losing because good people won't tolerate leadership they don't respect? How much time are you spending managing problems caused by poor communication, broken trust, or inconsistent leadership? The 360 assessment takes maybe 10 to 15 hours total. The assessment, the debrief, the action planning, the follow-up. How much time would fixing those blind spots save you over the next year? How much would it be worth to restore your influence and rebuild trust with your team? There's 2 critical warnings, though, I want to give first. If you're considering bringing in a facilitator, make sure you're ready to hear the truth. Don't hire someone to facilitate a 360 if you're going to rationalize away the feedback or defend the leader against the data. The whole point is to see what the leader can't see on their own. And if you're not ready for that level of vulnerability, wait until you are. Secondly, never use the 360 results for performance evaluations, compensation, or promotion decisions. The moment you tie 360 feedback to high-stake outcomes, people stop being honest. This tool is for developmental purposes, period. If you use it any other way, you'll destroy its credibility and waste everyone's time. The leadership assessment isn't comfortable, but leaders who lean into discomfort, they're the ones who experience real transformation. Now let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor, Amplifying Impact Events.
Leadership development shouldn't be another generic workshop where your team sits through PowerPoint slides and walks away unchanged. At Amplifying Impact Events, we translate field-tested methodologies from high-performance environments into practical frameworks that actually transform how your leaders lead. We specialize in organizational leadership training through workshops, summits, and retreats that build real capabilities, not just inspire good intentions. Whether you need a half-day workshop on a specific leadership challenge, a full leadership summit for your entire team, or a multi-day retreat that transforms your organizational culture, we bring systematic, proven frameworks that create lasting change. Our approach is simple. Equip leaders with tools they can use immediately, build teams through shared language and systems, and create the discipline that turns vision into execution. If you're tired of leadership training that doesn't stick, visit amplifyingimpactevents.com to explore how we can bring field-tested leadership development to your organization. You can also email us at events@amplifyingimpactevents.com to start a conversation about what your team needs. Because leadership development should amplify your impact, and we're here to make that happen.
Welcome back. Let me bring this full circle with Brian's story, the leader I mentioned at the beginning. When Brian completed his 360 assessment, here's what the data revealed. He rated himself 4.5 out of 5 on communicates the why behind decisions. His team, they rated him at a 2.1. He rated himself at 4.8 on follows through on commitments. His team, they rated him at 2.8. He rated himself 4.2 on treats team members consistently. The team rated him at a 2.3. Yeah, the gaps were massive. The qualitative feedback hit even harder. This is some of the comments that Brian received. Brian says he wants transparency, but he makes decisions behind closed doors and then just announces them. He commits to things in the moment, but never follows through on the small stuff, only the big projects that leadership cares about. His mood is unpredictable. Some days he's approachable. Other days you don't want to get near him. Brian was devastated by this feedback, but here's what I told him. This feedback isn't an indictment of who you are. It's a gift showing you the gap between your intent and your impact. We built a HAS development plan focusing on 2 areas. First, the communication gap. The habit we created was before announcing any decision, document the why and share that first. The action that we created was start team meetings with, here's what we decided and why, instead of just here's what we decided. And then the system we created around the communication gap was to create a decision log that tracks major choices and rationale and share that with the team monthly. The second area was his consistency gap. The habit we created was a morning reflection where he would set his intentions for how he would show up that day. The action we created was to implement a 5-minute pause before responding to mistakes or problem. This eliminated the reactive mood swings. And then the system for this was weekly one-on-ones with direct reports to build relational consistency, not just transactional interactions. 6 months later, we did do a mini 360, and here's what changed. Communicates the why, went from a 2.1 to a 4.3. Follows through on commitments, went from a 2.8 to a 4.1. Each team members consistently went from a 2.3 to a 4.4. But the real proof, team engagement scores jumped significantly. Turnover dropped, and Brian's influence grew, not because of his title, but because of his character. He told me, Mark, I thought I was a good leader. Turns out I was just being a good manager with a title. Now I'm actually leading. That's the power of a 360 assessment. It doesn't just give you data. It gives you the clarity to close the gap between who you think you are and who you actually show up as. Here's how the journey works with Amplifying Impact events. My LinkedIn newsletter introduces you to the leadership challenges and concepts. This podcast gives you deeper frameworks and practical tools you can start applying. But the complete transformation, the full assessment tools, customized implementation strategies, and hands-on development support, that happens through our live events and workshops. If you're ready to move beyond information into true organizational transformation, visit amplifyingimpactevents.com to schedule a consultation. Let's talk about bringing these systematic approaches directly to your leadership team. Here's what I want you to take away from today's episode. First, we all have blind spots. Every leader does. The question isn't whether they exist. It's whether you're brave enough to see them. Secondly, the 360 leadership assessment is the mirror that reveals those blind spots. It exposes the gap between intentions and impact, between who you think you are and who you actually show up as. Third, data without action is just discouragement. The whole point of the 360 is to create a systematic development plan using the HAS framework, building the habits, actions, and systems that transform the leader. And fourth, this isn't comfortable. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. Growth never happens in the comfort zone, but the leaders who lean into discomfort, they're the ones who experience real transformation. So here's your next step. If you have a leader on your team who struggles with influencing with integrity, or if you just know deep down there's a gap between how they lead and how their team experiences their leadership, it's time to take action. Reach out to us at Amplifying Impact Events. We facilitate 360 assessments for individual leaders and entire leadership teams. Visit amplifyingimpactevents.com/360 or email events@amplifyingimpactevents.com. Start a conversation this week. Sit down with that leader and ask, I'm noticing some feedback patterns from your team. Would you be open to going through a 360 assessment to get a complete picture of how your leadership is being experienced? Frame it as development, not discipline. Make it clear this is about helping them grow, not punishing them. Because here's the truth. Their team already knows their blind spots. And influence isn't built on good intentions. It's built on consistent alignment between what leaders say and what they do, between who they claim to be and who they actually show up as. The 360 assessment is a tool that exposes that gap. The HAS framework is a system that closes it. And your willingness to invest in this level of development for your leaders, that's what separates organizations that have managers from organizations that have leaders with real influence. On the next episode of Amplifying Impact, we're diving into the second element of the impact assessment, multiply what matters. If you took the assessment and scored lowest in this area, you're probably working harder than anyone else on your team, but not seeing proportional results. You're stuck in the weeds, managing tasks instead of multiplying impact through others. We're going to talk about the Delegation Readiness Matrix, a systematic tool that helps you identify who you can delegate to, what you can delegate, how to delegate effectively, and how to multiply your impact without micromanaging. If you're exhausted, overwhelmed, and you feel like you're the only person who can get things done, this episode is for you. Thank you for joining me on the Amplifying Impact podcast. If this episode helped you see leadership development differently, please share it with another leader who's ready to move beyond conventional approaches. Also, I'd be grateful if you take 30 seconds to leave a rating or review. It helps other leaders discover the systematic approaches to leadership development. Leadership is better when we lift each other up. For more resources and to explore bringing the complete impact leadership assessment framework to your organization, visit amplifyingimpactevents.com. You can also check out the full podcast archive at amplifyingimpactpodcast.com. Until next time, keep amplifying your impact, and remember, the world needs the unique leader that only you can be.